Margaret was always the quiet one in her family. As a divorced mother who lived alone, she loved being free. Her days were usually the same, but today was different. She left her comfort zone today for a reason: to go to the wedding of her distant cousin's son, which was an enormous event. The venue was filled with warm sunlight, which made it feel cozy and welcoming. Margaret smiled as she watched the wedding, which was full of love and happiness. There were bright flowers all over the place, which made everyone happier. The bride, Emily, looked beautiful and happy. Her wedding dress looked like it came from a fairy tale, and her groom was the right match for her. Margaret couldn't help but think about Emily's path to this point, and enjoy the little things about the wedding, like the pretty flowers and the lace on Emily's dress. After living a quiet life, Margaret was shocked to be part of this party. It was very moving. It made her think about how unpredictable life is, and as she watched the vows, she felt hopeful. It reminded her that the most beautiful parts of life can happen when you least expect them. When the wedding was over, everyone was happy and praised the newlyweds. Margaret couldn't stop thinking about the small scar on Emily's back, while everyone else was having a good time. An unusual mark that brought back memories, feelings, and a lot of questions. After the guests left, Margaret found a quiet place to talk to Susan, who has been a friend and companion of hers since her childhood. "Did you see the birthmark on Emily's back? It made me sound surprised, interested, and a little excited. It exactly matched the one my daughter had." Susan groaned as she tried to remember the mark she had seen at the event. "You really mean that? I saw something, but it didn't interest me much. Something seems off about it." Although Margaret didn't know what this meant, her heart was racing. How likely is it to happen? Was Emily her long-lost daughter that she had been looking for so long, like something out of a happy story? It was almost too good to be true. Margaret couldn't get rid of the picture of Emily's birthmark, even after the wedding. It made her think about the daughter she had lost, and the sad years of being apart from her. As the sun went down and the stars came out one night, Margaret felt better after telling her lifelong friend Sarah about her secret sadness. Sarah had been there for her through the hardest times. Margaret's voice shook as she talked about her painful past while she drank champagne on the porch. "Sarah, I haven't seen my daughter in years. I lost her in a tough court case with Richard." Sarah looked at Margaret with understanding eyes as she carefully listened to her painful statement. She knew Margaret was carrying a big load of sadness and loss that not many people could understand. Sarah put a reassuring hand on Margaret's shoulder and told her to keep going. Margaret's voice shook as she talked about the hardest parts of the court case that had destroyed her life. She clearly described how her husband Richard had hurt her by saying she wasn't suitable to be married and wasn't responsible. She would never forget those days in court. They had changed her life in ways she'd never thought were possible. It hurt even more to lose her daughter because of the false charges that took her rights away as a mother. She hadn't talked about that part of her life because she was sad and felt bad about it. When Margaret told Sarah the story, she felt a little bit stressed about her past. She had been carrying this weight all by herself for too long. Telling her friend about it was the first thing that helped her heal the wounds that had been there for years. She couldn't get her thoughts out as the night went on. They stuck around and pressed her to pay attention. She knew she couldn't miss this chance without looking for answers. The potential that made her feel so many things had to be looked into. The moon was rising in the sky after the wedding, and Margaret knew it was time to be brave. As she walked up to Emily, her hands were sweaty from being so scared. She was about to face a big truth that might make her life different. Margaret stood in front of Emily and stared at her birthmark that had led her on this unexpected trip. "Excuse me, dear," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I need to ask you something." Emily turned to look at Margaret. Her eyes were full of wonder. "Of course, Margaret, what is it?" Margaret took a moment to think about what she had just said. She was a mix of nerves, hope, and determination. "Emily, did you have that mark on your back from birth? A small one in the shape of a heart?" As she waited for Emily's answer, Margaret's question hung in the air, making the moment tense. They were the only ones in the room waiting for answers that had been expected for a long time. It felt like time had stopped. Emily was surprised and interested when she finally spoke. "Yes, I do," she answered with a surprise in her voice. I've had it ever since I was born. Aunt Margaret, why do you ask?" Margaret's eyes were filled with tears, and she felt a rush of feeling that she had been holding back for a long time. She couldn't help but reach out and gently touch Emily's scar, looking for a link that had been hidden for years. She whispered, "I don't know how to say this, dear, but I think—" Her voice was shaking from years of desire and sadness. "Dear Emily, you are my daughter. Your dad took you away from me, and I looked for you all this time. I lost you when you were a little girl." The news hung in the air. It was a truth that could change their lives and restore family ties that had been torn apart by time and lies. Now that the truth was out, they could start to heal and get back together. The birthmark on Emily's back made her eyes widen in shock, and she touched it right away, as if to make sure it was real. It took a while for the shocking news to sink in. "When I was young, my mother left me. How are you, my mother?" She took a deep breath, and her voice was sorrowful and determined at the same time. "The story is long and painful, Emily. I've been carrying it around with me for a long time. Your dad lied about the truth." Margaret got so upset that she could no longer hold back her feelings. She gave Emily a tight hug while the wedding party was going on. Tears were running down her face. In a weak voice, she said, "I've missed you so much, my dear." Emily clung to Margaret because the news was so shocking that it made her feel sick. Right in front of her was her mother, the one she had been told had left her years ago. She had no idea that the truth would be so complex and painful. "I can't believe this is happening," Emily said quietly, her face wet with shock and relief. "I believe my mum didn't want me." Margaret squeezed Emily's hand and spoke in a firm voice. "Emily, I know it's a lot to take in, but I'll never let you go again." Emily's feelings were like a storm inside her, each feeling crashing into the next. She thought her mother had left her years ago, but there she was, standing right in front of her. A shocking discovery turned her world upside down and left her lost in a sea of shock and disbelief. Emily was crying as she looked at Margaret. She looked at her like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She touched the birthmark on her back over and over again, as if she needed to be sure it was real, as if she needed proof that it was not a dream. Emily finally said, "I don't know what to say." Her voice was shaking from the weight of telling the truth. "The thought of this is too much to handle." Margaret held Emily's gaze, and her eyes were filled with love and understanding of her mother. She understood how sad and angry her daughter was, and she knew that Emily's life would change a lot because of this news. She would have to wait a while to figure out the truth about their meeting and the lies that had kept them apart for so long. Margaret told her, "You don't have to say anything right away, my dear." Her voice was soft and calming. With a soft touch, she reached out to wipe Emily's tears away. "We have all the time in the world to talk and catch up on everything. What's important is that we found each other again." Emily and Margaret found comfort in being together in the days after their wonderful meeting. During the busy wedding, they found time to start putting together their life story. Margaret began to tell her story while sitting in the shade of a leafy oak tree. Her voice was both longing and happy at the same time. "Emily, I want to tell you everything," she began, her voice a little shaky. "The time we spent together when you were a baby, and the love I've always had for you." Margaret's voice made her think of the early days they spent together. In every word she spoke, she could feel the warmth of their bond as she talked about holding Emily. She talked about the soft lullabies and whispered promises of love that filled their home, making it a place where love and devotion would never decline. Emily paid close attention and held on to every word as her mother talked about these special occasions. She related to the stories and could feel the love that had always been there between them, even though they had been apart for years. As the story continued, Margaret's voice got louder. She talked about the harder parts of their story, like the hard days in court when her husband, Richard, falsely accused her. Emily took each piece of information with a mix of anger and sadness. She was sad about the mother she had lost without realizing it, and the terrible thing that had kept them apart for so long. Their stories helped them heal from the scars of time and lying by connecting them to their present. Emily saw her mother as someone who had loved her from the moment she was born, and as someone who had lived through years of pain and desire. It took time, but they were slowly getting back together again, and the love that had always been there was stronger than ever. Soon, Margaret's story turned to the hard times she had went through in court, when her husband Richard accused her of things she didn't do. When Emily listened, her mother told her about how Richard had used manipulations to keep them apart for so long. Emily felt both angry and sad. That man was my father," Emily said, her voice shaking with anger and despair. "He lied to me for years. He led me to believe that you did not want me." Margaret agreed, and tears came from her eyes as she understood how much her daughter was hurting. "Emily, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I did everything I could to protect you, but he lied and tricked us to stay apart." Margaret reassured Emily that the reunion was a chance to heal and rebuild the mother-daughter tie that had been unfairly broken. Emily was having a hard time with the painful truth about what her father had done. Margaret talked about their time together more and more as the weeks went by. She showed Emily old pictures of the two of them when they were younger. The pictures froze moments in time, when their love had grown despite the problems they were having. They both looked into the past that they had in common. Emily was amazed by the pictures of herself as a child, being held gently by her mother. In one picture, Margaret was holding Emily, and a small, heart-shaped scar on her back could be seen clearly. It made them think how close they had always been, even when things were hard. Emily touched the picture with care, and her voice was choked up with feelings. "Now I can see it," she said with tears in her eyes. "Even in these pictures, I can see the love in your eyes." Margaret smiled through her tears because she was glad that Emily was beginning to understand how deeply they were connected. "My dear, we have a lot to catch up on. I hope you'll give us a chance to get back together." Emily went to Margaret's old house, which was a big step for her. It helped her find her past and get to know the mother she had always wanted, but never really understood. As they got closer to the neighborhood Emily knew well, she started to remember things from her early childhood. The white picket fence and the lovely yard around the house made it look the same as it did from the beginning. When they got to the front door, Emily's heart was beating fast. Margaret opened the door. They walked into the room that felt like it belonged to her a long time ago. It smelled like Emily's youth and had old pictures and worn-out furniture. Emily felt like she was back in a world she had almost forgotten. Margaret showed her around the rooms and told her stories about the times they had spent together. Emily felt touched by how much love and care had gone into making her home warm and wonderful. They found a clean box of Emily's childhood toys and souvenirs in her bedroom. It was like a treasure chest full of memories that had been waiting for her to come back. There were pieces of their past all around them. As they sat on the couch in the living room, Margaret looked at Emily with tears in her eyes. She told Emily, "This was your home, and it still can be if you want it to be." After going to Margaret's house, the mother and daughter began to reconnect in a way that surprised and relieved both of them. Emily started to talk more about her life being away from her mother for a while. She talked about her problems, her hopes, and how hard things were to grow up without her mother. Emily talked about how her childhood was ruined by her father's gambling problem. She had seen him have trouble with money, act in strange ways, and grow emotionally detached. Also, her stepmother hadn't been a good mother figure. She had been cold and uninterested. Margaret paid close attention because she could feel her daughter's pain after being apart for so long. She knew it had been hard for both of them, but now they could heal together. Emily was very relieved when she finally told the person who understood her the best about what she had been through. The two women talked, laughed, and cried for hours as they went through the difficult feelings that had been building up for years. Emily was frustrated by the actions of her father and stepmother. Margaret helped her deal with her feelings and led her to forgive and understand. In turn, Emily told Margaret that her love and efforts had not been in vain. They were linked by the things that they had been through together and their unwavering love for each other. They became closer by going through hard times together, which made their bond stronger. The mother and daughter talked all day and night about the years they had missed and the life they could have lived together. She talked about her school days, her hopes to become an artist, and the friends she had made. Margaret was amazed by how much her daughter had changed and praised how strong and creative she was. They got back into old hobbies like cooking and farming. and tried new things together. Emily took her mother to art shows and classes to get her interested in art. In return, Margaret told her about her own interests and hobbies, which made a beautiful mix of their love. Their house turned into a loving and welcoming place, where they could laugh and remember special times. Margaret and Emily redecorated it together, picking colors and furniture that showed who they were and what they were trying to do. They got rid of old pictures of them when they were apart, and put up new ones that showed them together. With their legal battles settled, Emily and Margaret continued to navigate their newly reunited lives. Emily was set on finding out the truth about what her father had done and the lies he had been telling her for so long. Margaret helped her daughter find peace because she knew how important it was to tell her the whole truth. The research went deeper and deeper, and they found a long history of lies and manipulation that went back many years. Because of what Richard did, their family was split up, and both mother and daughter were put in a lot of pain. Emily's journey to learn about herself was hard, but she was determined to face her past. Emily was able to accept and move on with her life after her father's actions because she learned more and more about them and her mother's constant support. She knew she couldn't change the past, but with Margaret by her side, she felt stronger and more ready to face the future. They started to rebuild their lives together, becoming stronger and closer than ever. Emily and Margaret chose to face their past head-on and set out on a journey to get back their life that had been taken away from them. They hired a skilled private investigator whose speciality was bringing families back together after lives had split them up. They worked through the complicated formal steps needed to change Emily's name back to Marta, which was her birth name. It showed who she really was and was a step towards healing their broken past. It was hard and mentally draining to deal with the legal system. To make their case, they gathered proof, witnesses, and papers. Meeting with detectives, talking to their lawyers for hours, and going to court became normal for them. Because they were both determined, they turned to each other for support through it all. As they dealt with the difficulties of their court case, they found comfort in the fact that they were on the same path. Emily was amazed by how committed and determined her mother was, all the time. Margaret, on the other hand, was proud of how brave and strong Emily was as they fought to fix things. The more time went by, the closer they became, which made them even more determined to win the fight. Emily told the judge more about her father's difficult past, with each step they took to get justice. She told him he had died because of the stress and bad effects of his gambling problem. Margaret had said in court that Emily's memories of her father were of a guy who was troubled and not present. Emily's sad story about her father's drug use, his careless actions, and how it affected their family were very clear. Margaret listened with understanding because she knew her daughter had been through a lot while she was gone. Emily's news made them both feel different emotions. Sad that she had lost a father who had been part of her life, and happy that she had found her real mother. They talked about the past many nights, worked through their pain together, and found comfort with each other. Emily was able to face the painful memories she had hidden deep inside thanks to Margaret's love and support. They worked through their feelings together, slowly fixing the wounds that years of being apart and lying had caused. They were ready to make the most of their second chance as a family, now that they had left their past behind and started a new part of their lives. They began to make new memories together and loved every moment they had as mother and daughter. Over time, Emily and Margaret realized that they had not only gotten back together, but they had also found a friend and companion for life in each other. They swore they would never let anything separate them again. The power of a mother's love and strength of the human spirit were shown in their story. They dealt with the problems in life together, using their love to protect them and letting go of the lies from the past. They looked forward to the future with hope and positivity, sure that their love could get them through anything. Emily and Margaret's bond as a mother and daughter would never be broken. They went forward with unwavering love, gratitude, and a deep appreciation for the second chance life had given them. They wrote a new part of their story together, one about love, forgiveness, and the constant strength of the human heart.